back to the channel. It's your boy Omar, and I'm very honored, very glad to bring on, half of the six-man show. Welcome, Jonathan. How you doing?
What's going on, Omar? Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm good. Luke, unfortunately, couldn't be with us tonight. This is now the fifth pod that I've recorded in the last 7 days. Obviously, a lot of trades have been made. A lot of people want to talk about the Orlando Magic. So Luke just kind of needed a night off, but I'm more than happy to be with you, man. Really excited. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and do check out their podcast. It's very, very good
Yes,
insights.
please.
It's a lot of fun to listen to.
Thank you. Yes, at Six Man Show, wherever you are. Little shameless plug. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, at Six Man Show. Thank you.
All right, let's get into it. So we just saw the Magic beat the Clippers last night. Very exciting game. I really fought hard against the Tankers for a lot of part of this year. I was one of the last ones to finally give up. But regardless, I'll take them like that any day. When it's our young guys being the majority of the reason why we win a game, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think last night was definitely exciting. I think we started off down 10-0 against the Clippers pretty quickly. You're down double digits in that first half. Start to chip away in the second half, like these Steve Clifford led Orlando Magic teams tend to do. I think down 3 heading into the fourth quarter. And I think with just about three or 4 minutes to go on ESPN's win probability, the Magic had like a 3% chance or like a 0.3% chance. I don't remember exactly. It was very slim odds to come back and win that game. And then you see guys, like Wendell Carter make huge defensive plays. Being able to pull out the W, like you said, it's really hard to be upset about a win like that with a lot of the young guys that we have. Now, hopefully we don't get too many of those this year. Obviously, the front office has made it very clear that draft position is going to be very important this year. So with that comes a lot of losing. But yeah, man, just like you said, it's pretty hard to be upset about a win like that.
Yeah, and it's like we're getting a good glimpse of the future, but it's also bringing a lot of questions. And I think when it comes to this rebuild specifically, I don't really see this as like a long-term rebuild because we're not starting from scratch. This isn't like the Hennigan rebuild where we still had Jameer, Turkoglu, Glenn Davis on the roster. This is all young guys. And now we're about to go into the offseason with the, as of right now, the number 4 pick if like nothing moves. And honestly, I would very gladly take Jalen Green.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
And then when you're looking at the roster, there's a lot of young guys. So I'm trying to gauge what people think when I say this, but how would you feel like if Orlando decided to move the 10th pick? Because you don't want to necessarily have a team full of young guys and no veterans on the roster.
Well, yeah, I definitely share your sentiment on Jalen Green. Jalen Green is a guy that I've been high on for months. I really thought he would have been the perfect fit next to Markelle in the backcourt. And then you've got Chuma Okeke, Jonathan Isaac, and I was planning on having Nikola Vucevic for a long time. We all know that is not going to happen now. So I think at this point, the Magic just need to draft, whether that's at 1 or that's at 4, whoever they think is going to give them the best shot of becoming like the franchise player, whether that's Cade Cunningham or even if it's Evan Mobley or Jalen Suggs, Jalen Green. I still think I'm right there. Either Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green is, the guy that I think I would want the most. But yeah, man, I mean, the future is definitely bright. When it comes to the 10th pick, I'm not really sure. I think it depends on if the Magic don't end up in the top 4 and they need to try to pair a pick to try to move up, then I would definitely be open to that. But right now, I think you need to give as many guys chances as you can because you need to find the next franchise guy, the next Shaq or the next T-Mac or the next Dwight Howard. You need to find that for this franchise. And if you're not absolutely confident that you're getting that at the 4th or 5th pick, it's worth the risk at 10 to draft another guy and see what you have there. I think, at least in my opinion.
I think that's a very fair point. It's just I'm very nervous of this draft, especially because we just lived through it and a lot of things trusting the lottery and building through a young team where our bench pieces were young guys, whether it be Maurice Harkless, some of those guys, and then we didn't have like the best veterans. No offense to Channing Frye or Ben Gordon, but they were more of the careers near the end. They were just there to be there. We overpaid Channing Frye, and I don't necessarily want to make that mistake over again. Because that's why I think Oladipo didn't really pan out well here. He just didn't have that veteran behind him to really help him. That's why I think Vooch was able to keep the mentality of get better, getting better, because he had Turkoglu when he got here. Jameer was still here.
Yeah, I definitely think, a lot of us are almost traumatized from the way that the Hennigan era went, right? Because, you go through all that tanking. The best pick that you end up getting was 2013, which was number 2, which was Oladipo. I think most people would agree that it was a fairly weak draft. I mean, Anthony Bennett goes number 1. 2014, you draft Aaron Gordon, Elfrid Payton. 2015, you draft Mario Hezonja. And then 2016, obviously, you trade Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis for Serge Ibaka, which we ended up flipping basically for Terrence Ross and a second-round pick. That second-round pick now did help us trade for Markelle Fultz, but I think we have to understand it and just realize there's a pretty significant difference between the Hennigan regime and what we now have as, the Weltham regime, as a lot of us call them. This isn't the same front office, thankfully. I don't think they're going to make the same mistakes. But just like you said, overpaying for veterans that aren't really going to move the needle. Rob Hennigan, basically, his arm was twisted into hiring Scott Skiles, and then Scott Skiles went to him in January. I mean, I think we were 19-13 in December, and then Elfrid Payton gets hurt at the beginning of January that season. And then I think we might have went like 2-14 in the month of January. Scott Skiles goes to Rob Hennigan and wants to quit. And what can I do to stay? What can I do to get you to stay? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, we'll trade Tobias Harris for Brandon Jennings and Ersan Ilyasova. And that just went so well to the point that Scott Skiles actually quit in May after that regular season. So luckily, I don't think we're dealing with the same animal when it comes to the front office. I have a lot more faith in this front office.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think the way Clifford's approaching this end of the season, I think he's approaching it very well. And some fans might not agree with it, but I agree with holding these players accountable. There's no moral victory. That's what I was curious to see after we trade all these guys. Would he be more have more leeway with the young guys? But he doesn't. He wants to make sure they're having to play a certain way and having to do things right so they don't build bad habits going forward.
Yeah, I think that's really a good thing about Clifford, but sometimes it almost works against him because he does keep the young guys accountable. I'm not saying that he doesn't do that, but I think at times the amount of accountability that he holds to the veterans sometimes comes into question. Steve Clifford has said multiple times that he doesn't coach decisions on the floor, whether you're going to make this pass or you're going to take this shot. But I think coaching is a big part of coaching decisions, right? Like if a guy is taking shots that he shouldn't be taking, should take him to the side and say, listen, you are not Steph Curry. I'm looking at you, MCW. You are not Steph Curry. You should not be taking sometimes 3 and 4 threes in a game. That should just never happen for a guy who, for the better part of his career is a sub 30% 3-point shooter. He's gotten away from some of that as the season has gone on. But then there was a lot of things that, I was a big Evan Fournier fan, but I could understand why a lot of people found him to be a frustrating player at times. I found him to be a frustrating player. And I think, and then we talk about even Aaron Gordon, right? Like Aaron Gordon, all the potential that he had, but the offensive fouls, which really became a bad habit of his, where he would dribble into the paint and then take that 10 to 12 foot fadeaway that just was not very efficient at. Things like that, I think a coach should be able to, especially a coach of his caliber, who by all accounts does keep guys accountable and keeps it fair across the board for all players. You should be able to go to a guy and say, look, these are the percentages that you're shooting on these shots. This compared to the rest of the league, this isn't really a strength for you. We should try to do other things. And I think that comes into question sometimes with Steve Clifford, in my opinion. But I would agree with you when it comes to the young players. If we look at Mo Bamba hasn't seen the floor because Steve Clifford is holding him to a very high standard, making him earn those minutes, essentially giving him no other option than to try and outplay Kem Birch, which he hasn't exactly been successful at this far. But I would agree with you. Steve Clifford is the right coach for this rebuild, as long as he wants to stick around, and I think he does.
Yeah, and I think what's the word, like the saying that he doesn't like to play young players, but I think if you take away Mo Bamba from that, because we'll talk about Mo in a minute, he played when we made the playoffs the first time. The starting forwards were Jonathan Isaac and Aaron Gordon. He played Markelle Fultz. He quickly took Augustine on the line to put in Markelle to start. So I think if you just don't look at Mo and his unique situation that he does. If the young players do prove to him that they're outplaying the veterans, they will play more minutes.
I think the biggest thing with Steve Clifford is you need to do the small things to see playing time. So it's not necessarily about the box score, right? But you have to rebound, you have to play with effort, you can't turn the ball over, and you have to pay attention to detail. And we look at the rookies. I mean, Cole started to get a lot of playing time mostly because of injuries, early part of the season. I mean, Michael Carter Williams was still dealing with that left foot strain that he suffered in the bubble that kept him out of the Bucks playoff series. Obviously, Markelle Fultz tears his ACL, so he almost had no choice but to play Cole. But Cole definitely started to improve once he got past like the 20 game mark in the season.
It seemed like it slowed down for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really what most of these guys need, right? They need playing time, which is part of the reason that you wanted to see Mo Bamba get some more playing time, because experience is definitely going to help these guys. But I think your assessment of Steve Clifford is accurate. I think it's fair. If you play well, he doesn't care how old you are, what your experience is. If you're playing well, you're contributing to winning, you're building winning habits, you're doing the small things on the floor, again, that contribute to winning, he will put you on the floor. Absolutely.
So speaking of rebounding, I'm now seeing the reason Bamba wasn't playing these large minutes into these games. These weaknesses I didn't know he had. I didn't know these were issues since he was playing such short stints, but I guess he saw it when he was getting outbodied by Birch and Booch during practice. So I don't know, because when it seems like, I don't know if it's like the motive to box out, but Zubac, Harrell, and Nurkic to this point, and even Canner has bullied him inside the paint and gave up a lot of offensive rebounds.
I think when you look at the stature of those guys and then you look at Mo, like he's put on a lot of weight since being drafted, but he's still a pretty slender guy. Not everybody has the Dwight Howard broad shoulders that just fills out and the dude looks like Superman in a Magic jersey. Like not everybody is going to have that. I do think there is the potential for Mo to get a little bit bigger. I just don't know how much bigger he's going to get. With Mo, I don't think it's just the stature, but he just seems to be out of position a lot of times. Like last night, there was an instance where he's guarding Zubac and he almost gave up the position to him. He didn't even try to stay in front of him to try to rebound the ball. So it's things like that. The rebounding with Mo is definitely an issue at his size and those long arms that he has. With enough effort and physicality, he should be able to get to almost any rebound while he's out there. And then it's just other things. Like sometimes he still looks lost defensively. Sometimes he's on offense and he's just looking around to see, who's the next guy that I'm going to set a pick for, So there's definitely question marks with Mo. But the biggest thing for me was this season, you have to put him out there to see what he can do, to see if he can get better. We're starting to see that he's starting to get some more minutes. It's really going to be interesting to me how they handle his contract situation coming, into the off season, whether they're going to offer him a contract extension or whether they're just going to go into the year and kind of see how things play out. After that, he'll be a restricted free agent after next season. So do they extend a qualifying offer? And to be honest, if Mo hasn't really played all of that well, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't agree to that qualifying offer, because the odds of him going out and getting more money than that, I kind of question that. I don't know how much value he has right now in the open market when we talk about that. So it's definitely going to be something to watch over, this year and going into next season. What's going to happen with Mo? He's going to have plenty of opportunities to prove to this front office that he was worthy of the 6th pick overall and that he's worthy of being considered, a franchise cornerstone moving forward. But it's all up to Mo.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we'll get into the new guys, but if we're comparing Mo to Wendell Carter is easily the better player right now, but I think Mo's ceiling is higher.
Yeah.
Because you can see he has the elite shot blocking ability, the ability to stretch the floor and knock down threes, use the pump fake and drive, that ability. But I don't know what it is, but when it's like we saw against Harrell where he's getting away with a lot of stuff when it comes to fouling, where he's wrapping guys and he doesn't get the foul called on him. And yeah, I saw it too. Like last night when Patrick Patterson came in at center, he looked very lost. Like he was looking around for like Zubac or whoever the center was, and he just looked completely lost. But yeah, I think as he does play more against other types of players that at the center spot, I think he will get it more. And I really hope he does because I always foresaw when Vooch was gone that he would take the mantle. But now he has even more competition at the center spot going forward.
Yeah, you read my mind, to be honest, Omar. I think Mo is easily the third center on this team right now in terms of who the best players are. Right now, I'd give a slight edge to Kem just because he's familiar with what Steve Clifford wants. He's been in this role now for 3 years or more. And then Wendell Carter, I think right now is the better player than Mo Bamba. He's more solid. You're less worried about him making mistakes. He's going to be in better position. The motor isn't as much of a question as it is with Mo. But the thing that I've always said about Mo, even earlier in the year when we were begging, Kem to, be sat so that Mo could get some playing time, or we were asking Kem to be traded at the deadline to open up playing time for Mo, is that Mo is just able to do things that not many guys in the NBA are capable of doing. You just mentioned, he definitely learned a lot from Vooch as far as attacking closeouts with that pump fake and the dribble into the lane. We just saw that the other night against the Lakers, and has the ability to be an elite rim protector. He's just so big and the arms are so long. He can just get to balls that other guys can't get to. So I would definitely agree with that he has the highest ceiling. He has the ability to be the most dynamic center on the team. And then we talk about his rim running ability. We saw a couple of that with Frank Mason when Frank Mason was with the Magic earlier this year, and the pick and roll and throwing lobs up to Mo Bamba. That was an element of Mo Bamba's game that we just hadn't seen before. And if he can hone in on just a few things, defensive positioning, playing with more physicality, knocking down, the threes at a better rate, which I think with more attempts, we will see those percentages come up. He has the potential to be the best center on this team, and honestly, he has the potential to make it not close. The ceiling is that high, like you said.
Yeah, and I think most fate will, or the fate, whoever be the franchise center is going to be who improves the most over this offseason, who comes into training camp, who beats out for the starting center spot going into training camp next season.
Yeah, and I think even depending on where you end up with this draft pick, for the Magic, whether it's in the top four or it's 1, 2, 3, Evan Mobley is a guy that, depending on where you are and who's been taken ahead of him, is a guy that you definitely need to look into. Now, you draft Evan Mobley again, 2018 when we drafted Mo Bamba. Everybody understood that this kid was going to be a 3 to 4 year project at least. Not only because the physical tools weren't quite there yet, he hadn't filled out, but because he was so raw, just in terms of his fundamentals and everything like that. Evan Mobley is definitely much further along skill wise than Mo Bamba, but for him to really be able to play with the Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Nikola Vucevic, he is definitely going to need some time to fill out. I wouldn't expect Evan Mobley to come into the league day one and just be dominant. Is he going to be probably like a Kristaps Porzingis the first year, where we see a lot of highlights, a lot of tip slams and things like that? You see the ball skills that he has for a guy his size is just unbelievable, to be quite frank. But that's another guy who is going to be a little bit of a project in terms of it's going to take time for him to develop it and fill out and really reach his potential. But I don't think you can rule out Evan Mobley being on this roster next year also.
So do you draft looking at best player available, or do you take who would fit best next to Ji and Markel and Mo/Wendell? Like, how do you pick with this pick?
So I would say 2 weeks ago, I would have been okay with, I thought the Magic with Vucevic on the team were probably going to end up with the third or fourth pick at best, maybe even the fifth pick. And in that range, I think a lot of us were really honing in on Jalen Green, not because he is, right now projected to still be available in that range, right? For a lot of the mock drafts the last few months, it's been Cade Cunningham #1, and then Evan Mobley or Jalen Suggs #2, and then the other guy at 3, depending on what mock draft you were looking at. So at that time, I was looking at Jalen Green being the best player available and the best fit. Right now, I think no matter where you pick, you have to pick the best player available. Again, we talked about having the 10th pick and what you're going to do with that. You need as many shots right now at hitting that home run in the lottery as you possibly can. So You take whoever you think is going to be the best player available, whatever guy you really believe is going to be the franchise changer. Now, when it comes to some of these guys, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs, Evan Mobley, I think all four of those guys have the potential to do that. But especially if you end up with the first pick, you better make sure you're right, because if you're not, that's again, we talked about the terrible lottery luck that we had in the Hennigan rebuild. If you don't start this rebuild off with a home run, that's really going to hold back this rebuild, I think.
Yeah, because if you mess up this pick, this team healthy is not going to be bad
Yeah,
enough
no
to get
way. You
another
get
shot.
Markelle and Ji back, there's no way you're in contention for the number 1 pick next year.
Especially since we're looking at this team with assets everywhere. This team, as we're looking at it right now, I don't think it's gonna what's gonna look like in this offseason. I think they're gonna take this offseason and mold it to more complete team that actually works better together than just talent all around.
Yeah, absolutely. This lottery and this pick is going to be your best chance to get the star, over the next 4 or 5 years. So I said this, you made these moves. I said this on our podcast earlier this week. You made these moves. You moved on from Vooch and everything like that. You better make sure you're getting this pick right, because if not, it's not a. We have a great start to the rebuild. You talked earlier about how you don't normally start a rebuild with guys like Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, Chuma Okeke, Cole Anthony, Wendell Carter, Mo Bamba, R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris. That's a heck of a start to a rebuild. But you need to make sure that you get this pick right, because this is the pick that's the franchise is either going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be in contention over the next 4 or 5 years, or this is going to be the Hennigan rebuild all over, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's gonna be tough living through another one of those. So we talked about Wendell a little bit. What have been like your first impressions of RJ Hampton?
So obviously Aaron Gordon leaving now, right? Like if Aaron Gordon is still on the team, Aaron Gordon might be the best athlete in the entire league. With that being said, now that Aaron Gordon's gone, you have RJ Hampton. I think RJ is the best athlete on this roster from day one. Just the lateral quickness that he has, just the straight line speed, the agility, the leaping ability. RJ Hampton is a guy that I'm really, really excited about. I still think he's pretty raw. He played with the New Zealand Breakers, last year as a professional rather than opting to go the college route. But you see flashes of the ability that he has, but still think there are a couple of things that he needs to tie up, particularly the handle. His hand, when he's dribbled, it's just a little bit too loose, and you saw that in a few turnovers in the Lakers game. But he's a guy that I'm really, really excited about. Him and Cole. I think the great thing about having both of those guys is either one of those going to be a star? I don't know. Is either one of those going to be a guy that can start on any given night? Probably. Yeah. But I think between the two of them, one of them is really going to hit. I think both of them have the ability to be extremely good. I would be shocked if both of them didn't end up at least being like a 6-man of the year type caliber player. I'd be pretty surprised by that. So I'm really excited for RJ, especially, we talk about these rookies and we've been talking about it really all year. I mean, you look at Chuma, who, yes, he had the experience with Lakeland last year, but you look at him, you look at Cole, you look at RJ, guys who didn't have a summer league, didn't have, the voluntary workouts that you normally do before training camp, didn't have an extended training camp, didn't have an extended preseason or anything like that. We're really like, I mean, Cole got drafted and it was like 2 weeks later, he's playing in the preseason. So this summer, this offseason is going to be really big for those guys. And usually each year when we have, high, draft picks and stuff like that, I'm super excited for summer league. This summer league team that the Magic are going to put together this year, potentially with Chuma, with Cole, with RJ, with our top draft pick, this has the potential to be one of the better summer league teams that we've seen in a really, really long time.
Yeah, and what really caught my eye about Hampton was it was off the broken play where he created something out of nothing, and he got an N1 off a jumper. And that was something where Bacon is the only other player on the roster that really has that ability, and it looked effortless. Not like he was going wild, but he looked comfortable doing it. And that was the one play that I was like, RJ might really turn into something.
Yeah, it was that play, and then there was a fast break layup that he had last night that it was just like
Yeah,
This kid is very fast. So when I saw that last night, like obviously we've seen the highlights of, of him dunking, and you always see guys dunking in an empty gym. But when I saw the speed that he had, I was like, this guy can jump, can run. I think he has all the physical tools to be a really good defender on the perimeter. So yeah, I've really been impressed by the level of athlete that he is. I didn't quite understand that as we acquired him. Everybody talked about how, oh, RJ Hampton isn't really a throw, and this is a guy who, potentially could be a star in this league. But when you see the athleticism like that, that's pretty special.
yeah, I completely agree. And you were talking about Chuma and the explosion of Chuma that we've seen since AG been gone. I didn't expect this, but I'll gladly take it. That when we were going to the season, we were told as fans that it was going to take a minute, that Chuma was more, that his shooting wasn't the great, but it was going to be decent. But this guy's shooting better than 40% and plus 60% the last couple of games. And I'm very excited. To be honest, I was really thinking about looking at Jonathan Kuminga if we did fall off 5, but I'll gladly be satisfied going into next year with Chuma and see what he turns into.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this out of Chuma at all. I mean, I think there were a couple of games when we still had Vooch, like looking back to the Warriors game, when we beat the Warriors. I believe that was in Golden State. But Chuma hit 2 huge threes in the last few minutes there to help us propel the Magic to that win. So we kind of knew that it was in there. Just kind of what we saw at him early in the season, the shooting stroke. I was pretty confident in the fact that he would be a guy that could get into the 37, 38, 39, potentially 40%. So I'm not that impressed, or I am impressed. I shouldn't say that. I'm not that surprised that he's shooting the ball the way that he is from 3, but it's been the other things like, like the mid-range game, his ability to take some guys off of the dribble. That's what's really been surprising to me in Chuma, and just the level of aggressiveness that he's been playing the last 5 or so games that he's been starting. But really, the last few games, starting with, I believe it was the Portland game, or it might have been the game before that, the Phoenix game. But how it's like every other night he's setting a career high. Had a great game last night as well, like you mentioned. Right now, over the last 4 games, I think he's shooting 68% from the floor, 60% from 3. That's not going to keep up. But the thing that I like to remember is, especially Victor Oladipo's first couple of years, he had a lot of attempts, but he just wasn't very efficient. Chuma is putting up numbers while being incredibly efficient. So it's definitely been really encouraging. Now, when we get a guy potentially like a Jalen Green and you bring back Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac is going to want more of an offensive role. So I think what's going to end up happening with Chuma is he's going to end up being like the Rashard Lewis, a guy who is most of the time going to be a spot up shooter. But if he needs to, he'll be able to take you off of the dribble while also being a versatile defender. A lot of people have made that comparison lately of Chuma to Rashard Lewis. They've even started with the comparisons of Chuma to Kawhi Leonard. Chuma becomes Kawhi Leonard, then we're talking about something completely different, and it just transforms this franchise. But I've been super excited about Chuma. When the team announced that they were going to start with the pre-sales for the earned edition jerseys a few weeks back, I wasn't really thrilled about the fact that Aaron Gordon was the only jersey available on the Orlando Magic team shop, because my thing was like, I've already got like 3 Aaron Gordon jerseys. But then the thing was like, this guy probably isn't going to be here 3-4 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So luckily, I don't know if you listen to the Orlando Magic UK podcast, but one of the gentlemen that contributes to that, his name is Garrett. He told me that if you go to the NBA EU store, I forget the exact URL for that, but they allow you to customize the jersey with whatever name and number you want. So I went in, I typed Okeke, I got the number 3. So I think that's going to ship sometime in May. And I was just like, man, I tweeted this out. I said, please don't trade, because I bought a Cole Anthony jersey. My wife got me that for Christmas. I said, please don't trade either of the rookies of who I just bought jerseys for. So I'm excited that I did buy that Chuma jersey, because he's looking like a stud. I don't know if you're into Top Shop, but I bought the Chuma Okeke moment last year during quarantine. You and I talked about how I got into some of the sports memorabilia. I bought a decent amount of Chuma rookie cards as well, because I was, apart from the knee injury that he had early in the year, if we see this Chuma for the whole year, we're talking about a guy that's potentially in the rookie of the year conversation. So
Right.
I was pretty confident that he was going to be pretty good. I didn't know that he would be this good. And it is a small sample size. We think we might want to pump the Chuma brakes just a little bit, but definitely excited and encouraged what we've seen from him so far.
Yeah, I completely agree. And speaking of jerseys, I'm very scared of buying another present jersey. The last two jerseys I bought have been Oladipo, Tobias Harris, and Aaron Gordon. I was going to buy a Boost jersey, but I was waiting for the trade to come. I knew the moment I bought it was going to happen, and when he made the All Star game, I thought about buying him. I'm like, I'm gonna wait one more deadline before I pull the trigger. And there he goes. So I don't know. I
Right.
think Ji might be uh maybe a secure one to go to because I don't want to buy another jersey just for them to get traded. But before we wrap things up here, let I usually like to look at the couple games ahead, but since these games don't necessarily gonna matter in terms of playoff race, I want to see where you gauge some of the veterans, whether or not they keep them in the offseason or they trade them. So let's start off with Otto Porter.
So Otto Porter Jr., I definitely think he's a really good player. I don't think he's a bad player by any means, but I don't think even at the time that it was signed, I didn't think the large contract that he received a few years ago. I never thought that he was quite worth that amount of money. And I think the first year with the Bulls, you could argue he played extremely well for the Bulls a few years ago, but since then you just kind of slowly but surely seen a bit of a drop off with Otto Porter in terms of his production. Again, I still think he's a good player. I think he can contribute to a really good team. But this year, and he's expiring, I think he's making like $28 million. So I think he's probably going to see this opportunity with Orlando as like a extended tryout, almost like an extended showcase to show teams around the league of what he's still capable of doing. I don't think that he fits into Orlando's vision long term. Right now, if you look at the forward position, you look at Chuma Okeke, you look at Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter. You can argue he's like a
Yeah.
4/5, depending on who you draft. Kem Birch, I don't know if he's going to be brought back. I don't know if we were going to talk about him at all. But Otto Porter is a guy that is probably going to want to start somewhere and have a significant role next year. And I don't think that's going to come in Orlando. So now, if he wants to take a significant pay cut, which I don't think that he should, and I don't think that he would, still think he's probably going to get paid somewhere in the upper teens, maybe the low 20s million dollars next year. I don't think that should come in an Orlando Magic uniform. And I think the front office wants to hold on to their long-term cap flexibility in the case that they can sign a free agent, or in the case that you want to, trade some of these guys, for like maybe a potential sign and trade situation where you're looking to absorb a guy that has a large contract. So I think a big reason that they made these moves the last week was to free up some of that cap flexibility. If you re-sign Otto Porter Jr., you get rid of a lot of that almost immediately.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was my same thought too. I thought even if he were to take less money, I would still think because he still is only 26, 27 years old, that I would assume he would want a larger role. But like you mentioned, you have Ji, Chuma, Wendell Carter that can play the four, Terrence Ross that can still play the three, and then you could still draft a 2 or 3 wing position. So yeah, I completely agree. I don't think Otto Porter comes back this year. I mean next season. But if that's the case, I think you got to keep someone like Gary Harris, we can move on to now, who is going to provide veteran leadership in this locker room.
Yeah, I like Gary Harris a lot. We tweeted out today just kind of like a quick highlight video of Gary Harris, and I just was not aware of he's got like the 2K layup package. Like he's got the reverses, he's got the 360s, he's got a lot of those moves that I was like, okay, Gary, I didn't realize you really had that in you. But Gary's problem the last few seasons has just been he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Right now, he's still dealing with a thigh issue, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't even know if we're going to see Gary Harris for the rest of the season. I certainly hope so. I think the Magic made the trade for Gary fully intending on the rest of this year and potentially next season, like being just taking a flyer on him to see what he can do. By all accounts, he's one of the better perimeter defenders in the league. So I'm really excited to see what Gary Harris can do. I expect him to be on the roster next year. Outside of that, I'm not really all that sure. Again, that guy's, he's making $20 million a year right now. And if you're looking to re-sign him, is he going to want a pay increase? Potentially, but I think he plays out the rest of this year and next season. Then we'll be in more of a position to evaluate that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. My hope is that they keep him. I mean, depends. I think again, it depends on the draft, but I really do hope they keep Gary Harris. He's going to provide a lot of if it's RG Hampton's backcourt next to Gary Harris, I think he provides a lot of help. Finally, get him healthy, go playing into next year because when he was healthy, he was averaging 17 points a game on efficient shooting. Great defender. He's exactly what Coach Clifford especially likes in a player. So I would assume Orlando would like to keep him. But if he isn't able to get back to that stature, I wouldn't be surprised if Orlando moves him at the deadline for an Evan Fournier-esque deal, especially if they don't use the trade exception this time around with Evan Fournier.
Yeah, and a lot of that is going to play into, what they do in the draft. If you draft a Jalen Green, I think there's a good chance. I mean, I don't want to see it happen necessarily, but I think there's a good chance that we see Terrence Ross move this offseason. He's going to be going into the last couple of years of his deal. He might be a guy that, he re-signed thinking that he was going to be playing for a playoff team a couple of years ago. So he potentially, a lot of people say, he loves Orlando and his family loves Orlando, but you just never know with these guys. And, if the last week is any indication, anything can happen at this point. I almost, the only thing I think I would be surprised by is if they're looking to move Markelle and J.I. That would be slightly more shocking than them, being willing to move on from Vooch. But yeah, a lot is going to depend on the draft. If you have Jalen Green, if you're going to hold on to Terrence Ross, then you probably end up moving Gary Harris because, again, then we're kind of getting into this logjam at the guard position where a couple of years ago it was the power forward. But no, I'm really looking forward to Gary Harris. I hope that he's able to come back pretty soon. Maybe the Magic don't want him to come back. I mean, last night you just beat the LA Clippers without him, so maybe he comes back and he makes you a little bit too much good. Who knows?
I think Terrence Ross, I think if they were going to trade Terrence Ross, they would have done it by now. I think they would have done it at the deadline, especially if you knew Gary Harris was coming in. I think Terrence Ross is probably, in my opinion, the safest veteran out of the veterans that they still have. I fully expect him to be on the team next season.
I hope so. I really do. I love me some Torch.
I love the Torch. Yeah, and again, he's another veteran in the locker room that would really help, and he gets along with the young guys, and I think it would really help these guys. And then, if I'm not mistaken, the final veteran is Ken Birch. I think Ken Birch doesn't come back. I think Ken Birch is going to look for a more solidified role as a backup center in this league. I don't think he wants to do the tango again of fighting with Bamba and Wendell Carter Jr. for the minutes at the center position. I just think he doesn't come back.
Yeah, so there's also, James Ennis, Michael Carter Williams. Those guys, I'm in favor of those guys staying. Ken Birch is another guy that, if he wanted to come back, given the state of the rebuild at this point, like the cream is going to rise to the top. If Wendell Carter and Mo Bamba are better than Ken Birch, they're going to show that they're better than Ken Birch. And not to take away from Ken Birch, but if either of those guys can't prove to be better than Ken Birch, then what do you really have in them? Those guys are much better or much younger than Ken Birch, much more athletic. They have, the measurables for those guys is better. They can jump higher. They've got longer arms, all of these types of things. If they can't beat out Ken Birch, that says more about them than it does Ken, in my opinion. But I think that you're probably right. I think he's probably going to look for more of a solidified role. However, I do know that he likes Orlando. I know he likes playing for the Magic. I know that he took less money to come to the NBA rather than play overseas, strictly because he wanted to play in the NBA. So it's all going to depend on kind of what his market value is. I think the Magic probably extend some type of 1 or 2 year deal like they did a couple of years ago to see if he will stick around. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kem is gone next season. Honestly, I expected him to be gone at the trade deadline.
Yes, I personally fell for it was early and I fell for a sham tweet from a fake account saying that he got traded to New York. I fell for that.
Yeah.
I fell for that one. I thought he was gone, but I thought honestly it was gonna be him and AG definitely got the deadline, but he's still here. But yeah, as you said, my apologies to MCW and James Ennis.
No worries.
I,
So
I
many new guys, it's hard to keep track of who's on the team these days.
so I think when it comes to these two guys specifically, there's a lot of frustration with them. But the same way I said about Fournier, I think they're just playing completely out of role, especially MCW, who's not supposed to be a starting caliber point guard in this league. He's supposed to be the scrappy backup or even an energy guy on the third string. I hope they bring back MCW. I think he's a lot of good intensity guy, which this team desperately needs. They need a guy who's willing to get into a face or get into a little scuffle like James Ennis did in the playoffs. I really hope they bring those two guys back.
And let's talk about that scuffle with James Ennis. That just absolutely ridiculous. That both of those guys got kicked out of that game. But I feel very similar with Michael Carter Williams. I'm hoping that once Cole comes back, that he is given the starting role again. Then we'll see Michael Carter Williams with the second unit, and then either you don't see Chase and Randall, or maybe he's even waived at that point. I just don't know. I haven't really been very impressed with Chase and Randall. Michael Carter Williams definitely can be a frustrating player, but like Evan Fournier is miscast in what he's currently being asked to do. James Ennis, in my opinion, I'm a big James Ennis fan. I was upset when we made that trade and then Wes Iwundu started to lose his minutes. And I apologize to James because James is a much better player than Wes Iwundu. James, I feel like, does a good job of kind of staying within his role. Now, he is going to be asked to do a little bit too much given the state of this current roster, but I think James Ennis is the perfect vet to help bring some of these young guys along, and is one of like the quiet types that just works really hard and leads by example. And I love guys like that. And I think James Ennis is like he's like 85% of like the perfect glue guy. If he was just a little bit more capable offensively, he would be the perfect role player. But I love James Ennis. I do hope that we hang on to Michael Carter Williams and James Ennis. You need veterans in the locker room, and I think those two guys really bring that chip on their shoulder, bring the edge to a team that they really desperately need. I think when you look back to the 2018-2019 season, there were two major turning points in that season. One was when Mo Bamba went down and Kem Birch became the full-time backup center, just because he was really the better player at that time. Just really contributed to winning in a way that Mo wasn't at that time. And then when the Magic decided to go from Jerry and Grant to Isaiah Briscoe, Isaiah brought some of that energy and that edge in the second unit. Jerry and Grant was just terrible. But when Isaiah Briscoe injured his knee, a lot of us were like, oh my God, the season's over. What are we going to do without Isaiah Briscoe? Now, the Magic waive him, unfortunately, bring in Michael Carter Williams, and Michael Carter Williams was just as good, if not better, in that role than Isaiah Briscoe, and brought that edge, brought that intensity, especially in the second unit that this team desperately needed, helped get them into the playoffs over, I think it was like 12 or 14 games of the regular season that Michael Carter Williams actually played in. And then we all remember game one, getting hit in the face by Kyle Lowry, blood just pouring down his face as he's hauling down the court to scream at the refs. I remember being at game 3 last year, or no, 2018, 2019, sorry, being at game 3 in the playoffs. There was already a kid that had printed that on a t-shirt and was wearing it around, just MCW's bloody face. So those are the kind of guys and the vets that you need in a rebuild, in my opinion. So those two guys, I really hope they're able to stick around and the Magic hang on to them.
All right, now, final question. Can the Magic very well find themselves back in a playoff position?
Ooh, man, that's tough because now with the 9th and 10th play-in seeds, I'm not exactly clear on if that's going to carry over into next season. But if that's going to be a permanent fixture, the 10th seed, I think we've seen this year, the East is so bad, right? Like when you look at the Bulls, for instance, the Bulls are 11th or 12th in the East, but they're like 3.5 games out of the 4th seed. So you look at the playoffs right now, anything can happen. 3 to 10 or 4 to 10, excuse me, in the Eastern Conference playoffs. You could tell me that Chicago ends up like the 5th or 6th seed. I wouldn't be surprised at all. You could tell me, the Boston Celtics, they've had a lot of struggles. If you tell me they end up 4th, I would completely believe that, or the Miami Heat. So as long as there's this level of parity in the East, I mean, I think Charlotte was so good with LaMelo that had LaMelo not gotten hurt, they probably would have hung on to that 4th seed. But I think we're going to see them drop a little bit. The Knicks will probably be a little bit better next year. But it's just such a crapshoot in the East. You look at teams like Atlanta, like Chicago, like Cleveland. Could the Magic make the 10th seed next year? If Markelle and J.I. take the leap that we're hoping they do, and if we do end up drafting that transcendent player, some people, I don't see it, but some people have said that, oh, Cade is the next Luka. Luka is a once in a generation type of talent, in my opinion. However, if Cade or Jalen Green ends up being the type of player that from day one, they're one of your best 3 or 4 players, then we are talking about a team that's back into playoff contention very, very quickly. But trying to temper expectations, I think this team is probably going to be pretty bad, really bad next year. The rest of this year, probably pretty bad next year. And then by the 2023 season, that's when we should start really to expect this team to be back in the playoffs. But again, this isn't your typical rebuild. We have a really good starting foundation. And if those guys can develop quickly, I wouldn't be surprised if, a year or two, this team is back in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of this year has been like really weird when it comes to teams because a lot of players missed a lot of time with contract tracing, which is why Miami was so bad. Tatum missed a lot of time. Butler missed a lot of time. And that could be said about a lot of these teams. So I expect the East to be a lot better next year to the point where I don't think the Knicks necessarily get back into that spot, but I could very, very well be wrong depending on how RJ Barrett does the following year. I think Atlanta's going to be better. I think Cleveland's going to be better. But at the same time, I still do believe Orlando could be in that mix as well because Jonathan Isaac if he comes back exactly to where he was, but at some point being a defensive player of the year candidate, Markelle Fultz. So then your bench unit is a Cole Anthony and RJ Hampton. And then Wendell Carter or Mo, because I expect both of them to have that be the year where they fight for the starting spot. So you're going to have a solid second unit as well. So I believe this team might be fighting between that 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 spot.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I would be now. If you tell me they end up 11 or 12th in the East,
yeah,
I'm not going to fight you on that. That could very well happen. Like you
I think
said,
it's going to be very close.
Yeah, this year it has been, like you said, like with the contact tracing, a lot of stuff like that has been pretty tough. Even given that, we have seen teams, that have kind of had the ability to rise above that. Like if you look at the Clippers, like Kawhi Leonard missed some time with the contact tracing, and right now, although they lost to the Magic last night, over the last couple of weeks, they've been one of the best teams in the league. So, like you said, it's been a really weird year. It's gotten even weirder for us the last week. But the Magic have the potential. Are they going to reach that? I don't know over the next couple of years, but that's the hope with the rebuild is that you're hitting a home run on this pick that's coming in, and that's going to help you kind of jumpstart things. But only time is going to tell. Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz coming back, that's going to be a huge deal. I think people kind of like not underrated Jonathan Isaac, but he definitely is appreciated amongst Magic fans. But I think we almost underrate him as far as we know he's an amazing one-on-one defender, but how much better he makes your team's defense, I think goes underrated. And I think we're going to see that again next year.
Yeah, because I think Jai especially was able to help Vucevic a lot with with the issues defensively. And I think if he's there next to Mo, I think Mo's timing is going to look a lot better than what it actually is.
Yeah, Jonathan, he covers up a lot of mistakes. He really is this elite generational defensive talent. Like we say that all the time, and we kind of sound like homers, but you look back to like 2018, 2019, when the team was fully healthy and everyone, the continuity was there of everyone being together for a few years. That last 31 game stretch where the Magic went 22-9, that defense a lot of times was absolutely smothering. Teams could not breathe. And then the Magic really never matched that level in the 2019-2020 season. They started to get back to that. And then New Year's Day, Jonathan Isaac hurts his knee, and they're not the same team defensively without Jonathan Isaac out there. Everybody, can rant and rave about Aaron Gordon, his, defensive ability and versatility and everything like that. And Aaron is one of the better defenders in this league. But Jonathan is such a good defender that the last few years, Aaron Gordon's defense for most Magic fans has become an afterthought. That's how good Jonathan Isaac is. So I'm really excited to see him back on the floor next year. And if we get anywhere near to the offensive Jonathan Isaac that we saw in the early bubble before he tore his ACL, again, that's going to make a huge difference as well, because we never saw Jonathan doing the things that he was doing those first few games in the bubble, like against Denver and everything like that. So this rest of this year is going to be tough, but I'm really looking forward to next season for sure.
Yep, same as well. But that's going to wrap it up here. Thank you, Jonathan, so much for being on.
My pleasure, man. Anytime. Thank you.
Do go check out the Six Man Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can see it, YouTube. It's all there. Do check it out. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time. Like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.